All right. So, folks, I see a lot of people are joining. In case any one of you happens to be here in LA at KubeCon, feel free to find me either now. I am here in the expo area, close to, let's see, what do I see here? Behind me is coffee, but I'm looking at the Dynatrace booth. I'm looking at KubeCost Ambassador. So Dynatrace is G11. So in case you want to find us on the floor, then just let me know or just come over. That would be nice. Otherwise, if you cannot make it now, but you are here, we have a booth in the pavilion section in the afternoon today and also tomorrow starting at 2 p.m. So we're sharing it with Helm. So Helm is there in the morning and we are there in the afternoon. Now, folks, let me first kick it off with a question. Can you let me know if any one of you is already using Keptn and is kind of interested in learning some specifics, or who of you is completely new and just wants to get a quick overview of Keptn? Because I can go either way, right? We have about 40 or like 35 minutes or so. So let's make sure you get out of this what you want. If you can give me a quick, through the chat, that would be great. I'm new. That's awesome. Perfect. Okay, so if you're new, then let me quickly give you an overview of Keptn. For this, I want to share my screen. And here we go. Now, this is not what you want to see. So I gave a presentation yesterday at KubeCon. It was focused more on performance optimization using SLOs, because this is one of the use cases we see Keptn being used, but Keptn is much more than just automating the testing and the analysis of your applications. So I'm switching over here a little bit. Feel free to watch. I think the recording should be online. What Keptn really is and what is core to Keptn is an SLO evaluation component. So Keptn, maybe in one sentence, because people keep asking me, what is Keptn? Keptn is a declarative way to automate your delivery and operations tasks using SLO, service level objectives, to decide how to move on with your automation sequences that you want to automate. So it allows you to declaratively define automation for delivery and operations. And we're using SLO, service level objectives, to always validate and decide how your automation is running, whether you want to go forward with the next step, whether you want to react to a problem, yes or no. A key component of it is therefore SLOs. So the way SLOs work in Keptn is you specify SLI, service level indicators, through a YAML where you can specify queries basically against your observability platform, whether this is Prometheus, whether this is Dynatrace or any other of the monitoring vendors. So you define what metrics, what SLIs you're typically looking at. Then you specify SLOs, service level objectives. This means, right, when you are analyzing the quality of your current deployment, you typically know what you're expecting, how fast it should be, maybe something like failure rate, number of service calls. Also, security vulnerabilities is an interesting component that I give here. So you specify your SLOs. Then you specify your overall objective, because just as a human being, when you look at the health of your environment, you look at different things. You look at different metrics, at logs and stuff like this. And based on that, you have an understanding on how good or bad is the current situation. So what we do, we also look at all these SLIs, compare them against the SLOs, and then calculate a score across all of them. Now, if you are pushing a new deployment out into Kubernetes, then you can ask Keptn, how am I doing? So Keptn would then pull the information from your observability tool. You don't have to build anything here. You just need to define what metrics. It pulls them in, it compares them, and then calculates a total score. This total score is then reported back to whoever triggered this evaluation. Now, in my case here, build number 1 seems to be great. Then build number 2 comes along. Your developers push a new container out. You may run some tests, and then you want Keptn to automate the analysis. So in this case, we can see response time got a little slower. Also, the number of backend service calls that this service that you just deployed may now do 2 instead of 1 call to a backend service. So maybe the backend service is a database engine or something like this. And this is flagged now because this is not an allowed change based on your SLO, because in the SLO we specified the number of calls for our login feature should not increase at all. So this means plus 0%. You can actually compare with previous builds with a baseline. And so we violate, and therefore we come up here in this case with a percentage of 50, which means fast feedback, fully automated, back to your engineers. Hopefully they fix the problem, right? If they fix the problem, like in build number 3 here in my example, then everything looks good on response time, but all of a sudden we can see an open security vulnerability because we may pull in the number of found vulnerabilities from a tool like Falco, from a tool like Dynatrace, right? There's different tools that provide this. And again, you can factor all of these SLIs into the overall observation, into the overall scoring of the quality of your deployment. So build number 3 obviously is bad. Now build number 4 allows developers to immediately fix things, and therefore everything looks good. Build number 4. The idea here is to show you a very key component to Keptn. It's the SLO-driven approach. I also, in my talk yesterday, went a little deeper into how SLOs actually work. I will skip over this because you can watch this tomorrow. I rather want to focus on Keptn is not just evaluating SLOs, but it is the center of Keptn. What Keptn really does, it takes the concept of SLOs and provides you a declarative way to define the automation that you need in your delivery, but also in operations to keep your system safe and sound in production. And I think we have a new approach, and this is really, I think, what makes Keptn so special. Now, we got inspired by things that don't go well right now if you look at a lot of the automation that is built these days. And what I see out there, what we see, a lot of people use either their favorite automation tool that they've used years ago for classical CI. I'm naming Jenkins here as an example, or they use their favorite scripting language, whether it's Bash, PowerShell, or whether it's Python, whatever it is. And what we see though in classical automation scripts, they start small, but typically they start with a task and then a hard-coded integration to call a certain tool. And these tasks then grow because you automate more and more things. And what we've seen, these Jenkins pipelines, these shell scripts, these PowerShell scripts, they all grow and grow, and they, like 1,000 lines later, you have a hard-coded script that calls a tool, parses the response, based on the response, calls the next tool. Everything is hard-coded and very hard to maintain. So this is the problem we try to fix because this doesn't scale. So what we are doing, we're ripping apart this kind of big monolithic blob here. And we say, of course, what's important is a process. You always want to automate certain tasks in a certain sequence. So this is why with Keptn, you can define a so-called automation sequence, fully declarative as YAML. Then on the right side here, we have the tools. We separate them because we think the execution plane should be completely separate and should not be anything hard-coded the way you call these tools. So how do we do this actually? We are maintaining and pushing every configuration file that is needed, whether this is Helm charts, if you are using Helm for deployment, whether these are test files, your SLI and SLO definitions, any other configuration, we put this into Git, or we assume this is available in Git. And then we're using eventing to connect all of this together. So what Keptn really does, it allows you to define an automation sequence. It allows you to define the tools that should be involved later on, but they get involved through eventing. And once they get involved, they can get their data through Git. Now, how does this look like in an example? This is what I brought up yesterday in my talk, because I initially talked about performance engineering. So when you want to automate the task of deploying a new container, running a test, and then evaluating the results, here's how it looks with Keptn. You have a sequence that is in this case called performance, and I have a deploy, a test, and an evaluate stage or task in there. And now when I say Keptn trigger performance, I say, Keptn, I want you to now execute that sequence. And I'm giving you some additional data like the image that should be deployed. So what Keptn does, it starts by looking at your sequence definition, sends out the first event with the information, what task, deploy, what image, what stage, and maybe some additional metadata like blue-green. And then on the right side, you have one or multiple tools that are subscribing to these events. And I say multiple here because you can see here, I have a deployment tool. This could be a Helm service that we already provide. This could be an Argo pipeline. We have an Argo integration where we can trigger Argo. This could also be a Jenkins pipeline if you still have, let's say, invested in Jenkins and Jenkins does the deployment or anything else. Also, you see a dotted line to a notification tool. That means you can have multiple tools subscribe to an event. For instance, sending events to Slack, MS Teams, or wherever you want it. Everything is event-driven. It's loosely coupled. That's the nice thing. Tools can subscribe to an event and then do something. When they do something actively, like deployment, they need to report back when they start the activity and when the activity is done, and also the final result. And in this case, if deployment is done, Keptn goes on and executes the next task, which in this case is a test task with some metadata, which stage, what type of test maybe, in this case performance, and in this case, the performance testing tool that you have listening for incoming events would then trigger off, report back when it starts and when it finishes. And then the next magic comes, and this is the SLO evaluation. This is what I showed earlier, where I explained SLIs and SLOs. Keptn reaches out to your observability platform. For instance, Prometheus. Prometheus is then taking all the SLI definitions, the PromQLs, executes them, brings back the data, and does the evaluation as I've explained earlier. Okay? So, terminology-wise, we call what you see on the left the declaration of your automation sequences. They are stored in a so-called shipyard file. Then we have the individual tools in your execution plane. We call it the uniform. It's basically all the tools that you have running in your target systems, in your target environments, that are subscribing and listening for these events. We have Git as a config where all the files live, and then we're using cloud events. So here we are really using the cloud event open source project, and we have our own specifications here, and we're currently working with the CDF, the Continuous Delivery Foundation, to standardize also the content within these cloud events, because our goal in the future is that every tool out there by default already understands cloud events, so that we don't have to write now a listener that listens it and then listens for these cloud events and then triggers the tool. All right. So the nice thing how this looks like, right? Overall, we're not replacing tools. We are taking the pain away for you to give you more automation with less automation code. We are taking care of the orchestration of tasks. We are connecting to your existing tools, your testing tools, your deployment tools, your notification tools, your observability tools. We are connecting to them, but in a loosely coupled way. And at the center, as you can see here, we do the SLO evaluation. Every time a sequence runs and there's the evaluation step coming in, we evaluate by pulling back the SLIs and the SLOs and then decide in which direction to go. All right, let me quickly stop sharing my screen, because right now I'm here only on my laptop and I don't see if there's any questions coming in. So I want to make sure that I don't miss anything. I'm new to the Keptn. I think these are all the questions from earlier. Thanks for the initial feedback. That was great. So what I would love to do now, I will go back now and I'll show you how to get started and show you a little live demo. And then I will switch back to screen share to see the chat. Okay, so if you have questions, just use the chat feature, please. Okay, let's go back to sharing my screen. And here we go. So maybe before I go into the demo, I want to show one more thing, because I think this is important. People always say, well, Keptn, just because we always talk about delivery, or at least things in continuous delivery. I want to show you another use case that is very popular, because remember, Keptn is or allows you in a declarative way to specify which automation sequences or tasks should be executed, and also use SLO evaluations between individual steps. So in this case, I have another example for auto remediation, because you can use Keptn when you have a problem in production to then execute tasks to bring the system back to a healthy state. So in this case, on the right side, I have a couple of tools. I have a monitoring tool, I have an infrastructure automation tool, I have a deployment tool, I have a notification tool, and I have a ticketing tool, right? These are maybe, I don't know, your Ansible, your Argo, your Slack, and maybe your ServiceNow or Jira, whatever it is. So now, when your monitoring tool detects a problem or you have some type of alert, it can send a message over to Keptn, or it actually can trigger remediation, or it can trigger a sequence. In this case, it would say Keptn trigger remediation, because I have a remediation sequence specified. You give it a problem context and also the root cause context. And what happens is that for the particular feature of remediation, you can provide a so-called remediation YAML that defines the steps based on the root cause, based on the problem that was identified. So that means you can define different sequences depending on the problem that was detected. And in my case here, I have specified as a first action clean disk, because if there's a problem, high failure rate, and the root cause is log disk latency, then maybe we need to clean the disk. So Keptn is sending the event over and says, I need a remediation task to be executed called clean disk. And here's some additional data like that came in from the monitoring tool. And then whatever tool you have that can do this and says, yes, I want to do it, I'm waiting for this, I can clean your disk, is then picking it up. Plus, again, we are showing here that you can subscribe multiple tools, like we can also send a message about the current status, what's been happening to your notification tool. Most important thing is, after every remediation action, Keptn is automatically evaluating your SLOs. That means it is reaching out to your monitoring tool and pulls back your SLOs to validate, is the system back to a healthy state or not? If it is good, then it's done. If it's not good, then it goes on with the next task. In this case, it could be a rollback where it sends an event and says, hey, I need some tool that do a rollback, right? And this could then be another tool that's doing it. Again, after every action, it will do an evaluation to figure out going forward or not. If it's good, it's good. If not, then it goes on, and it could go all the way until the end, until you say, well, nothing helped, so now we're escalating and creating a ticket. All right, so now enough with the slides, but I want to just make sure that you understand we are a tool that allows you to declaratively automate your tasks around delivery, but also operations. I think this is important. Okay, so let me go inception mode. Here we go. So everything starts for you with Keptn.sh. This is our website. We also have obviously Git. So if you go to Keptn on Git, right, here we go. That's another great starting point. We always love people that contribute. We always love people to try it out. But yeah, I think the best way to start is, check out what we have on Git, but also start on the website, where we give you installation instructions, where you find all additional resources. Now, I want to show you one cool thing, which is the live demo. If you click on Explore Live Demo, it brings you to a tutorial. Now, this tutorial actually explains this code lab explains different demos or different projects that are on that demo cluster. There's one with Litmos for chaos engineering, two-stage delivery, another three-stage delivery, and also a feature flag example with auto remediation built in. There's a little video that Jürgen recorded. Great job. So watch the video. He walks you basically also through the demo. But if you click on this link here, the Keptn public demo, then you actually get to see the Keptn UI Live. We call this the bridge. So the Keptn bridge is really where you are seeing what projects have you specified and what's currently happening in these projects. Now, let me explain this to you. For instance, every project, remember when I explained you have sequences and you have tools and then you have configuration. Behind the scenes, every project has a Git repository. And we have specified these upstreams here to GitHub, so you should also be able to get to this data. And I want to really show you and focus first on Shipyard, because when you create a new project with Keptn, you always need to start with a Shipyard definition. Remember, this is the definition of sequences that you want Keptn to automate. In this example, we have a sequence called delivery. And it does a deployment, a test, and then an evaluate. And what we always do, we are grouping sequences into stages, which makes sense, right? Think of stages as your environments. So you want to define sequences that you want to automate and then provide them to certain services in a certain stage or environment. So if you look at this In the chaos stage, we have a delivery sequence that first does a deployment, where we add some additional metadata about it should be a direct deployment, and then test, and it should be a performance test, and after everything is done, an evaluation should be triggered. This is everything that you need to do. There's no definition here which tools should do it. Remember, why? Because later on, you're responsible to obviously provide tools that subscribe to events that Keptn will send when it executes the sequence. So now let me go back to Keptn and let me show you. So Litmus here, right? If I click on Litmus, then there's different views that we have here in a Keptn project. You can see it on the left, environment, service, sequences, uniform, and then some settings. Environment is really, we only have the chaos environment, right? This was like the stage. If we click on services, we get a service-specific view. In my case, I have a single service onboarded, which means this service can enjoy being executing the sequence. Now, if you are on that service, the service view always focuses on what is important for the service owner. What is important? It is the quality of the latest automation sequence that ran. And this is why we highlight here immediately this quality gate overview, right? The heat map, the SLOs. So it's a really nice way to see every column here represents the run of the evaluation for a previous automation sequence that was executed. The last one on the far right being the latest one that was executed. You can see here there were two SLIs, probe duration and probe success, and then there's a score. Remember, we're always pulling in the metrics, we compare them against the objectives, and then we make up a total score. If you want to know the individual numbers that were really pulled in this case, I think from Prometheus, they will also show up here, right? So that means when this sequence ran, I see what was the final result. Now I can also click on that delivery sequence, and it gets me to the latest sequence execution. So I'm also now back here in the sequence screen. So the sequence screen really now, as you can see, you can scroll down. I think on a scheduled basis, the sequences are executed every couple of hours. And every time the sequence is executed, I get to see what's actually happened. Now, pointing you back to, right, we are in chaos. Chaos is the stage. Delivery is the sequence name. And then within the sequence, we had deployment, test, and evaluate and get SLI. Now, to trigger such a sequence, you're actually sending in an event to Keptn, or you use the CLI. This starts everything off. Now, if I look at the first action here, deployment, what Keptn really does, remember, it sends events that are then handled or subscribed to and consumed by a tool that you have configured to consume that event to support this particular use case, this particular task in a particular stage. So for deployment, we can actually look at the event. This is the event that Keptn sends out. What's important is the type. It basically says deployment triggered. So I'm triggering a deployment for the project Litmus, for the service Hello Service, for the stage Chaos. And then there's some additional information. For instance, deployment strategy direct. Let me quickly go back to the shipyard file, right? This is exactly this. The deployment task has additional custom properties where you can specify some metadata direct. This will automatically be picked up by Keptn and will be included into that event. The last thing that I see here is additional information. Like in this case, whoever triggered this sequence added, hey, here's some additional metadata, like I want to do this configuration change. I want to use this particular image with a certain replica count. This is now data that is sent out, and in my case, the Helm service is listening and subscribing to these events, is picking it up, and the first thing a tool needs to do in order to participate in a workflow, if it's doing actively something that takes some time, it basically needs to send back, hey, yes, Keptn, I just started the deployment task, right? I am the Helm service, and I just started this. So let me do my job. Once the Helm service is done, it then sends back a finished event. In this case, the Helm service sent back deployment finished, and additionally adds some data, like, hey, what was actually the URL it deployed it to, both local and public? Maybe some additional data, right? So every tool can then respond with what it did, what the status was. Status is very important, passed, and some additional metadata. Now, this metadata gets passed on by Keptn to the next task. The next task is testing. So what Keptn does, it sends out an event and says, hey, test triggered. Who can handle the test triggered event? Here's some additional information. First of all the information from the previous tasks the context of the project, the stage, plus additional metadata from the shipyard file, test strategy performance. Remember, I go back to the shipyard file. For testing, it was specified test strategy performance. And in my case here, as you can probably see, I have two tools that are jumping in. I have JMeter that is executing some load, and I have Litmus that is then executing a chaos experiment. So both start. That's also the nice thing. Multiple tools can subscribe to the same event, and Keptn will orchestrate it and wait until both tools are done. And what they then respond back will also be shown here. Now you may wonder, so where are the test files? Where's the Litmus chaos definition? Where's the Helm chart? How does this all work? Well, if I go back to the config repo, then I've only shown you what's in the main branch. But every time you create a project, not only do you get a main branch, but you get a branch for every stage. This is where you now upload and maintain your tool-specific configuration files for a particular service. I have my Hello service, so in the Hello service folder, I have my Helm charts. Or in my Hello service folder, I have my JMeter files. Or in the Hello service folder, I have my Litmus experiment definition. Last but not least, I also have my Prometheus definition with my SLIs, my definition of how the metrics are actually queried. And on the service level, also my SLOs, my service level objectives, right? So how should Keptn then evaluate the result when he queries or gets the data from Prometheus? So it's all in Git. And that means if I go back to Keptn now, every tool that is participating and says, yes, I can do it, will also then have access to this Git repository and can get the files that you have put on that particular stage for that particular project, for that particular service. That's pretty cool. And then I forgot about the evaluation. So the evaluation is the next thing that kicks in here, right? And the evaluation in this case is done by the so-called Lighthouse service. It's reaching out to the individual tool by actually sending another get SLI event. In this case, my Prometheus service kicks in, pulls in the data, and once the data is back, then the Lighthouse service does the evaluation. And this is now, you've seen this before, but this is a very nice view again with the actual results. Now, there's many more things, I probably talk about, but I think in the idea you get it. One more thing before I stop sharing again and go back to the questions. There's also some nice examples here for multi-stage sequences. So what does this mean? You can define sequences and you can chain them together. In this case, we have defined a sequence that does delivery in hardening, and then once it's done, it triggers a delivery sequence in production. Okay, so that means you can chain them. How can you chain them? I just open up that particular repo as well. If I look at the shipyard here, right, it specifies in hardening, I have a delivery sequence that does deploy, blue-green, a test, evaluate, and then a release. Releasing means for blue-green deployment, right, this allows you to notify whatever tool you use for blue-green or canaries to actually really release it to let's say, to the full population. Because when you do a blue-green deployment and then you run a test, you may just run the test against the blue, then you evaluate, and based on that, you can then automatically say, now I'm switching it over. But the chaining here is interesting. You see on the bottom, I also have a delivery sequence in production, and it gets triggered on when hardening delivered has finished. And then it does a deployment and just a release, right? So you're completely flexible here in what sequences you want to specify. And that's the nice thing really about this. Now, remember, all of the examples are here, also on Git. I think the Unleash is also a really cool one because it does some feature flagging. And so let's see, the Unleash Potato Head, Hipster Store, Litmus, Sock Shop. Yeah, there's a couple of things here, right? You can check out. There's a lot of cool examples. Also with approval. So after an evaluation, you can even add an approval step where in the UI, you get a checkbox to approve it yes or no based on the results. There's a rollback example as well. So rollback is obviously very important. What if a sequence fails? Then you may want to execute something else. In this case, we are saying, I have a rollback sequence that will trigger if hardening delivery finished with the result fail, and then it triggers a rollback. The rollback could then, tell, I don't know, Argo rollouts to just roll back or whatever you tool are using. Right? So you see, it's really powerful, but in the end, it gives you a declarative way to automate any of your tasks for your delivery, but also for operations. And at the core, we're using SLOs to evaluate the status of your system that you're currently automating in. And based on that, you can then direct in which direction you want the automation to go without you having to write any automation code, without you having to write and maintain any tool integrations. And I think this is the key thing. So let me stop sharing again and go back to the chat. How long time can I configure SLIs before start Keptn? How long time can I configure SLIs before starting Keptn? So you can configure the SLIs and send it and upload it to the at any time. The evaluation happens when you trigger Keptn and say, Keptn, you do the evaluation now. Or if the evaluation happens as part of a deployment pipeline, or as part of, let's say, a longer sequence that Keptn does. Now, for the evaluation, if you just use the evaluation alone, you can trigger it. And the nice thing is you can specify the time frame. So you can say, Keptn, I want you to run a sequence for evaluation, and please evaluate from 10 o'clock until 11 o'clock. Right? That's what you can do. Now, if you use Keptn in a sequence where you first do a deployment, then a test, and then an evaluate, by default, Keptn will take the time frame from the test and give that to the evaluation, because we assume you run a test, let's say for half an hour, a load test, and then you want to evaluate that half an hour. So we do this automatically. Thanks, Brad. Hey, good to see you. Do you have any documentation to download and review later? Yeah, I think Brad was just copying it in, but let me also copy it. The best way to get started is really the Keptn SH website. All right, let me just put this in. This is a great way to get started. Also, you get to the demo environment that I've just highlighted. I joined late, but I do understand it correctly that Keptn is a tool mainly used in CD phase rather than CI. So, Gunther, Keptn is a generic declarative automation framework where you can automate any type of sequences, whether it's for delivery or whether it's for operations. I highlighted earlier in my example a use case, and maybe let me go back to this again, because I believe this is important, because I get this a lot, because I get the question, are you just another CD tool? No, we are not. What we are doing, we are bringing you an automation framework that is declarative, that is centered around SLOs, so you can specify what sequences you want to automate. Keptn takes care of communicating with these tools through an open standard eventing model. And we're automatically always pulling in metrics from, let's say, Prometheus or other monitoring tools, and always evaluate after every step of the automation whether to go on or not to go on. Now, the nice thing is you integrate Keptn in your existing ecosystem. If you have a tool that does CI, great. Then maybe use Keptn for CD. If you have a tool that already does CD, meaning you deploy, but you don't have automated performance tests yet, and you want to do some chaos engineering, and you want to do some evaluation, and you don't want to build this in your existing tool, even though it might be possible, but you would need to write some code yourself just from your existing tool. When you deploy, then trigger the Keptn evaluation. Or, and this is the last use case that I think is really exciting, because people are, I guess we just don't do a good enough job to explain this. It is the auto remediation use case. So you can use Keptn for auto remediation. What that means is, again, on the left side, I have my sequence that will unfold in a second. On the right side, I have my individual tools. They're completely decoupled because they're connected through events. If your monitoring tool detects a problem like, hey, high failure rate, root cause is a log disk latency issue, then this will be taken by Keptn. For the remediation use case, it will look up your remediation sequence based on the root cause. That means you can define different sequences for different root causes, which makes sense, right? Because you do different things depending on what the problem is. And in this case, the first task that I would have specified is, if there's a log disk latency, maybe I clean the disk, right? The log disk. So that means Keptn sends an event that is then picked up by a tool that can react to that action. Could be an infrastructure automation tool that cleans the disk. Additionally, Keptn can also send information to a notification tool, or let's say that way. A notification tool like Slack can subscribe to these events and then push the information to your Slack channel, because you want to know what's actually happening when somebody or a system like Keptn is automating the remediation. Most importantly, Keptn is then always evaluating your SLOs. It is looking at your SLOs that you've specified to understand, did this bring the system back to a healthy state? If yes, everything is good and we're done. If not, it goes on with the next action. Could be that you specified a rollback. Hey, if we have a high failure rate, maybe it's not the disk. Maybe we need to roll back to a previous version. Therefore, the rollback is triggered. After this, again, evaluation kicks in. If everything is good, awesome. If things fail, gotta stop there. And if now none of these actions, if you run out of actions that you would also execute as a human, if none of those work, then you can still escalate. And escalate could mean Keptn sends an event to a ticketing tool. Let's open up a Jira ticket, a ServiceNow ticket, or whatever ticketing tool you have. Okay, so this is really the stuff. We're not just a CD tool. It's very important. We support you a lot with getting more automation into your CD processes without you having to write the automation. So I always say, friends, don't let friends build their own automation. Friends first make their friends look at Keptn. Okay. Let's see. CD. Can Keptn be tied to a serverless platform to execute custom actions? Yes. Exactly, because remember it's an event-driven system, so you just need to subscribe to our event. So we also have ways to push our events to any webhook. You can just push it to a message queue or something like this, and then you can react on it. Does this support the data center deployments which are on-premise? Yes. So while Keptn itself, the core control plane runs on Kubernetes, the tools it triggers through the events can be anywhere. We have a lot of people that are triggering Jenkins pipeline. They are triggering, I don't know, Ansible scripts somewhere. So you can do it this is the nice thing, right? Keptn itself, yes, runs on Kubernetes, but it's the orchestration engine that runs on Kubernetes. The tool itself, the tools that do the job, they live wherever they live. Can we do a batch deployment of microservices per the priorities or as per? So the way you deploy, the way you kick off an automation sequence is up to you. You need to say when you want to trigger something. What you can do is you can, I showed the sequences earlier. So you could define sequences and chain them together. But across microservices, if you have multiple services, this is up to you on how you trigger it. I think, though, this is a great input for future improvements as well, so that we can say, please, Keptn, deploy these 10 services, but start with these 5 first, and if they are good, then the other ones. I think, Raj, if you could do me a favor, go to the Keptn Slack channel, slack.keptn.sh, and put this in there as a nice feature request, or even go to GitHub, go to our GitHub page and put in a feature request. That is really good. Do you know? During the RIP deployments, does this capture and report back to us in the time frame of each and every micro? Exactly. So what you get in Keptn, share my screen again. So, right, if you think about my deployment example earlier, let's take the potato head now. Every time you are running a deployment sequence, right? So in this case, deploy and then release, you can have, and I know I repeat myself now, but when you say report back to us, you can always have a tool subscribing to these events. And you can say, if you want to be notified every time Keptn does a deployment or every time Keptn finishes an evaluation, you just subscribe to that particular event. So for instance, for the evaluation finished, you would subscribe to this event here. It is a evaluation finished event. You would subscribe to it, and then this information would be sent to your tool. And in this case, actually including everything, the whole evaluation, every single result, and the total score. So you decide based on the subscription to the events, and this is the beautiful thing. We have this so-called uniform where you can add additional tools that are listening to events through what we call subscriptions. Right? And this is why you can also subscribe to multiple events. Different tools can subscribe to the same events. And then, for instance, one is doing the actual deployment. The other one is just sending the information that the deployment is happening to a Slack channel, for instance. Okay. Awesome. Let me go back. I think there was more questions that I saw. Last but not least, do we have any free version to this? Is all open source. Raj, this is all open source. And if you go to the Keptn.sh page, there's a link on that where it says live demo. a version running. But the Keptn is an open source project. That means as long as you have a Kubernetes cluster, then you can install Keptn. We also have some demos. We have a quick start guide. With a quick start guide where we show you how even on a laptop you can quickly stand up Keptn. We're using either K3s, K3D, or micro Kubernetes. We have some different quick start guides. Yeah. Also, during any deployment, if Keptn facing any issues, will it report back to the admin user about the issue? Again, yes. Keptn is an event-driven system. If a tool that Keptn triggers, like the Helm service in my example, has a problem and reports back the problem, then you can say, I don't know if you're using Slack, I want to get failed deployments in a particular Slack channel because you subscribe to that event with a particular metadata, and then you let it push into certain Slack channels. Yeah. One more question: how does Keptn communicate with various tools? This needs a secure mechanism to communicate. So Keptn uses an event-driven system. That means the tools itself, they are subscribing to Keptn. They're basically polling. Okay, so that means the communication goes from the tool that sits maybe somewhere in your infrastructure to Keptn control plane, wherever that sits in your environment. And it is, of course, a secure communication. And yeah, this is how this works. There's also architectural diagrams. If you go to Keptn.sh and then the doc, it's all explained there. Okay, it's through tokens, so the communication works through tokens that allow then the tool to talk with the API. Yeah. Good. I need to see how much time do we officially have. I think we are almost out of time, if I'm not mistaken. But if there's any more questions, let me know. There's still a couple of people on the call. Let me know through the chat. And also, if you happen to be here, right? I am at KubeCon. If you are at KubeCon, do me a favor. We have a booth in the afternoon, like in the pavilion section. And we have these nice T-shirts. They can come over, and we also raffle off AirPods. How much is Keptn in production usage? So we have a couple of nice use cases and case studies. Medium. I want to show you this here. This is my personal favorite. I'll send you the link. This is the Austrian software company that does all the banking software in Austria. They're using Keptn for their quality gate evaluation. And then we also have another use case that is using this for multi-tenant deployments for evaluation. We also have a Keptn YouTube channel where we are once a month we have a Keptn user group where users are talking about their usage, and all of these are also highlighted. NEIC was on there lastly. We had Intuit. We had all sorts of different companies. So hopefully these links help you that I've just posted into the chat. Zachary. And also feel free to join the Slack channel, right? If you go to slack.keptn.sh, this is where you find all the users. Just ask them, and then good. What's the status on the open source standardized spec on cloud events being official? Yeah, the CDF. So this is part of a CDF special interest group. As far as I know, they are presenting actually this afternoon here at KubeCon, and they're meeting. And it depends on that special interest group how fast they are moving. Hopefully sooner rather than later. So the goal is really to standardize. Not the cloud events itself are standard, but like the content that is within these cloud events. You saw me earlier with what information is in there, the image name, the test strategy. So we're currently working with different vendors in the DevOps space to come to a conclusion on what should these events look like, so that every tool vendor in the future, let's say if it's a testing tool or deployment tool, if they implement that standard and understand these events, then it becomes so much easier for everyone. Because right now, if you want to integrate a new tool, you obviously need to consume our event and somehow translate that into the API of the tool. And with standardizing those events, we enable tool vendors to just have an implementation of cloud of this standard, and then it's completely open. But right now, if you want to build an integration, then it's really easy because we have multiple templates on GitHub. We also have a really cool project. It's called the Job Executor, and the Job Executor allows you to provide any container, and then it just executes your container as a job in Kubernetes. How do you send back events to Keptn or start it? Yeah, so it's not a manifest. No, let me just share my screen again. Share my screen. So in Keptn, in this case, okay, this is my public demo. It's not all possible here. Let me just go to a Keptn. So here. So you have a, oh, come on. There we go. So you have a Keptn API endpoints. That means, for instance, the control plane allows you to query any type of event. You can also, for instance, like the evaluation, you can post an evaluation. You can do everything through the API, right? So if you want to trigger something, if you want to configure Keptn, everything is through the API. We also have one of our adopters. They did a Keptn GitOps operator. And what this team is doing, they basically allow you to define CRDs in Keptn, right? So basically the stuff that I've configured earlier in the shipyard file, they allow you to do this also using an operator approach. It's up to you how you do it, okay? So it's the GitOps operator. And as you can see here, there's a lot of stuff in the Keptn sandbox, including the Keptn service Go template for writing new services using our template. That's super easy then. Yeah. Exactly. Okay, let's see. I need to stop sharing again so I see your Q&A. Conrad and Dimitri, hopefully this answered your question. The last two that just came in. Hopefully I didn't miss anything on the top. Okay. I think we need to wrap up. That's what I hear. Okay. Yeah, as I said, plenty of opportunities to get in touch with us. We were looking forward to contributors as well, obviously, and also people that tell us what you think is missing. And again, if you happen to be at KubeCon, meet us. That would be nice. Okay. With this, stay healthy, stay safe. Hopefully, I'll see you soon in person. Bye bye.